Welcome back. We're going to have some fun today on Retro Recon. That's the working title of this podcast. But we're going to have a good time, a really good time, I hope. We're going to talk about King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. We're going to have a specific question about those 6 wives, and we're going to have an answer by the end of the podcast. So here's the thing. I love this entire topic. It's been a guilty pleasure of mine for quite some time. King Henry VIII and his 6 wives. I have anything I can get my hands on to read. I have researched. I absolutely love reading about the Tudors. I have a really an affinity, let's say, for this era in English history. So it's so much so that I have a course that I'm teaching this fall. UAB Honors College, shout out. I'm going to be doing a course on King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, right? It's full, so there's no spots available. I'm sorry, standing room only. But I do want to sort of give an idea of the kind of stuff we're going to cover, and also a very interesting question that I'm going to ask that we'll answer, right? So the question is, of Henry VIII's 6 wives, there's only one that is buried, has a burial, has a grave in Westminster Abbey. Only one. And you would think, there may be more than that. Well, I sort of knew this by reading some things, but when we went to England recently, London, outstanding place to go. You should go if you have never been. But we went to London, went to Westminster Abbey, and we discovered the one wife of Henry VIII that is buried in Westminster Abbey. So cool, right? But first off, let's go through, all 6, and then we'll answer the question, which it may not be who you think it is, actually. I don't know. You may already know the answer, but if you don't, we will by the end of this. We'll give you the answer. But first off, let's go through the 6 wives. You've heard it before. If you like the musical, or if you've heard the old song, divorced, beheaded, and died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. That's the thing. The 6 wives, there they are. Now, they're a lot more than just this, catchy little tune, right? Each one of them has a specific, quality that just makes them so unique. And each one of them is a lot of fun to look at, individually. But we're going to go through this pretty quick to go through each one, and then we'll answer the question about which one is actually buried in Westminster Abbey. With that's a pretty, an honor to be there. So here we go. Now, the first wife of King Henry VIII is Catherine of Aragon from Spain, right? Now, Catherine of Aragon is a queen through and through. That's how she was raised. Ferdinand and Isabella, her parents, raised her to be a queen, right? To be a monarch. That was it. Ferdinand and Isabella, that's a big deal, So they raised her this way. So she's perfect for the gig. There's no doubt about it. Catherine of Aragon is top notch. She's not going to pull any punches. She's going to be the queen, right? In fact, she was actually going to be queen to Henry's brother, Arthur, right? Arthur was the heir. Henry was the spare to King Henry VII, right? Now, how this turns out, Arthur, of course, marries Catherine of Aragon first, and he dies about a year or so after the marriage, maybe less. It wasn't long. Now, as the story goes, they never consummated the marriage, and this is why that Henry VIII will later actually marry Catherine of Aragon. So, the importance of that is a relationship between England and Spain. So this was a kind of an olive branch. It's like this is a union between England and Spain. It's important, and Catherine of Aragon was that. Now, Arthur, after he passed away, he died. Probably he got sick. They say it was the sweating sickness, I believe, which is this mysterious plague-like thing that came through England. A lot of people don't know what it is or what it was. Some people have claimed other stuff, but probably he got the sweating sickness and died, is likely what it was. Now, so then you have Catherine that's just hanging around, and Henry VII wants to keep this alliance with Spain. So he even steps up. Henry VII, old Henry VII, steps up and says, well, I'll marry her, right? Because his wife, had passed away. So you're like, well, I'll marry her. But it ends up being Henry VIII instead, which is really, probably the better choice because, that would have been, I don't know, odd, I guess, to say the least. But anyway, so Catherine ends up marrying Henry, and they are actually married for 24 years. He is married to her longer than any of the other wives. In fact, I mean, the other wives combined, they were married, for 14 years for every other wife, but he's married to her for 24. She is such a competent queen. There is a moment, which I actually love this particular moment with Catherine of Aragon. She is left alone in England while Henry is out waging war with Francis I in France. And she's left there, and the Scots decide they're going to invade around this time. And it's just Catherine that is there, right? And this is James IV that is coming in. And so she actually gives this rousing speech, Braveheart-like, if you've ever seen Braveheart, and tells, how brave the soldiers are. And she, delivers this wonderful speech and encourages the English soldiers to go out and beat the Scots. And they do. And James IV actually dies at this time. Which James IV is married to Henry's sister, Margaret. It's all incestuous. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, so you have Catherine of Aragon, who's the first wife. And of course, as the story goes, she did not give Henry the male heir. So he's looking for a male heir, right? And all that good stuff. Plus, the second wife, she gets a hold of him. This is Anne Boleyn, straight out of the French court. She spends a lot of time over there, and she learns a few things from the French. She comes back, Anne Boleyn, these captivating dark eyes that she had. They said her eyes were just like midnight dark. I mean, this just brown that was just captivating, mesmerizing, they say. So Anne Boleyn was the second wife. Henry falls for Anne Boleyn. Now, it's not like he was, just loyal to Catherine. I mean, as this goes, kings would, do whatever. I mean, they're not the greatest loyal husbands in the world. But Anne Boleyn so captivates Henry. And I think the biggest thing was that she would not really submit to him. She would not give herself to him. So this was the big thing for Henry. This is like, wait a minute, you can't, what are you doing? And this was, intriguing to him. So of course he fell head over heels for Anne, and he really, wanted to be with her. Also, in the back of his mind, he's thinking he wants a male heir, which he doesn't have, at this time. So he only has Mary, the daughter with Catherine of Aragon. So he wants to have a male heir, and he thinks this, young lady could do that for him. Now, Anne is a fascinating character all the way around. Anne is a very interesting lady. She's learned a lot of things. She has an interesting background. She spent a lot of time in the French court. And so there's a lot there with Anne. Now, an interesting side note to Anne Boleyn is that she, actually, there is a football club. I learned this recently from a friend of mine from across the pond. His name is also Chris Perry, interestingly enough, just like mine. We're, kin that way. So anyway, so there is a football club, West Ham football club that actually plays on Boleyn ground, right? So allegedly, this was where Henry had wooed Anne, was on this area where the football club plays. So interesting thing. Now, y'all know the story about Anne Boleyn. She's found guilty of all kinds of things. Likely, she was not guilty of all kinds of things. But Henry takes her head off. You know the whole story. There's a lot of different things about Anne we could talk about. But we're not going to spend too much time on that today. But I will say this. Now, you've all seen the portraits of Anne, and she has the pearls and the bee, right? You know, the whole thing that she used to wear. If you've never seen it, all you got to do is look up a portrait of Anne. She's wearing the necklace and it has the pearls. There's a bee with two pearls hanging, or two or three. I can't remember. Anyway, so today so the story goes that she left those to Elizabeth. Elizabeth kept them, and we believe, well, some people believe, I like to believe this. I don't know if it's true or not, but there are some things in the crown jewels today that they can't necessarily identify, but there's some pearls that some people believe are Anne Boleyn's necklace that are in that. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story. So there you go with that. So Anne Boleyn, she, of course, head chopped off, which she didn't deserve any of that, right? So Anne Boleyn. Now Henry had already took up with someone else's. Anne is on, one of her maids, or one of the people that were taking care of her in her little court, was a young lady named Jane Seymour. And Jane Seymour is a interesting character all the way around. Now, some people believe that Jane is actually Henry's favorite. Now, I believe the reason why that Jane is Henry's favorite wife, well, there's a couple reasons. First would be that Jane gives him the male heir, right, that he never was able to have. So Jane does give the male heir. But the other thing is she doesn't live long enough to really, that for Henry to get tired of her, really. I think, because after she gives birth to the male heir, she has complications. Likely it was that they did not, the Tudor doctors weren't the greatest at, certain things, and childbirth in general was a risky proposition at best. So the chances are they didn't remove the placenta completely. She has complications. She gets sick and she dies shortly thereafter. And that is, probably she didn't live long enough, so Henry didn't have enough time to get tired of her, because Henry was, by this point, I should mention, Henry VIII is even more cranky than he would have been as young Henry. Young Henry was this strapping lad, he was tall, he was good looking, he was thin, wasn't the larger, rotund Henry that we see later. And he was very active and, athletic. He was one of the princes that, people around Europe would, just looked at, Henry VIII, he's wonderful, he's great, he's all these things. So that's a interesting side note. Now, what happens with Henry is he has an accident, a jousting accident in the tilt yard, which I got to see the tilt yard, or what's left of it, at Hampton Court. That was pretty cool to be there. But he has an accident and he has an injury to his leg. And this thing, his legs, he almost dies. And it has a horse that falls on him. And he has this injury on it to his leg that the Tudor doctors keep the sore open, right? The sore stays open the whole time. It's this infected and it's festering, and they say you could smell it all the way down the other end of the hall. Maybe if you were away from him, you could smell it all over, because it was just this rotting. Ugh. Anyway, so he has to deal with this unbelievable pain. He becomes really kind of unstable, more so than he was before. So he's kind of hard to deal with around this time. And he's still looking for the next wife, right? Now, I should mention that the thing about Henry is when he would get like, angry or sideways with you, that was, you could be in a little bit of trouble, right? For an example, he tried to get a divorce, of course, from Catherine of Aragon, and he started basically his own religion to do it. And one of his advisors, his main advisor, Cardinal Wolsey, couldn't get the Catholic Church to agree to this, and that was sort of the death nail in his life. It didn't end well for him. And after Jane, one of his main advisors, his name is Thomas Cromwell. Interesting guy, all on his own. We don't have enough time to get too far into him, but he says, wait a minute, we need to go into an alliance. We need to get you married again, and all this. And so they go to Cleves, and they get Anne of Cleves. They send the famous artist Hans Holbein over there to draw a picture, paint a painting. You can still see this. This is very small miniature of Anne of Cleves, and brings it back, shows it to Henry, because Holbein was famous for uh, paintings that were so realistic, and you could really, make a pretty good judgment of what the person looked like by Holbein's paintings. So this picture comes back, and Henry looks at it, and he's like, "Oh man, you know, she's beautiful. That's her. That's her." So, Cromwell gets his way here, and he has this deal he wants to make with Cleves, and Anne of Cleves is the one, and so it's there. That's it. The match is made. So Henry's excited about this, right? So Anne of Cleves actually makes the journey to uh, England, and she's kind of just they do, they get there and they make camp or something, and they make this and they're waiting, and Henry decides he's going to sneak up on her, and he's going to surprise her and show up, and he wants to see her because he's excited. So he goes down, and as the story goes, Anne has no idea who he is, nor should she, because she's never met the guy, right? But he shows up and he sees her, and it's like this whole thing. It's like I think I think personally that he was offended by the fact that she didn't recognize him, or didn't, like, fawn all over him or whatever. So all of a sudden he, of course, becomes like anti Anne of Cleves. So much so, he says, of course, famously, "I like her not." He also says that she had evil smells coming from her, saying that the woman smelled bad. I mean, it's terrible stuff. So, he tries to get out of this marriage. He really tries, but Cromwell says, "Yeah, you need to kind of do it." So Henry reluctantly does it, right? So they get married, and of course the stories are just uh, pretty bad, the things that Henry says about Anne. Now Anne of Cleves, completely innocent. She has no idea that this is, I don't think, honestly, by the things that I've read about Anne, she thought that just sharing the bed with Henry meant that she was doing what she was supposed to do, right? Because there's no evidence that they consummated, I guess. They used to come in, the court would come in and like watch, that they would do this. They would actually come in and watch the king and the queen together in the bed, and they would stay a little while. Now, how long they stayed, I don't know, but they would stay a little while to make sure they were in the bed together, right? So it was kind of this whole thing. But there's no evidence that they ever really did, because some people think Henry wasn't even capable, not to get too far into that, but because he was so like not in good shape at this time. Anyway, so eventually they just decide that this is never going to work. So they come up with a way to annul the marriage and get, Henry wants to be divorced, or to remove himself from this marriage to Anne. And he does. Now, Anne makes out like a bandit on this deal, though, right? Because she actually lives, and, more than I can say for what happens to Cromwell, right? It doesn't end well for him after all this. So Anne, lives and actually gets Hever Castle. This was the Boleyn's property that Henry gives her, and she lives the rest of her life in England. Just and is well respected. People like her. I mean, it's like she really has a pretty decent life after this. Some people say that Henry and Anne actually strike up a relationship later and have communications, and she is considered to be the king's sister after all this, right? So she has a pretty good standing in England, let's say. But that's Anne of Cleves. So next is the ghost of Hampton Court, Catherine Howard, young Catherine. They say that her ghost haunts Hampton Court to this day. I was at Hampton Court and looked for her and even called for her, but she didn't show up. But because I feel bad for Catherine Howard, I really, really feel bad for her. She, I believe, was just put in a pretty bad situation all the way around. Catherine was just a child. I mean, she was a teenager when Henry, was smitten with her. She had had a very unfortunate life up to that point, probably been abused. I mean, there was a lot. She was Anne Boleyn's cousin as well. They were all related, it seemed like, So the Catherine Howard, very young. I mean, spirited. I mean, she just was like a teenage girl. I mean, really. I mean, like you would think today, if you have a teenage daughter today. I mean, she just had that spirit. She was, yeah. It's a very sad story because she ends up striking up a relationship with other people in the court, and it gets, kind of, Henry, of course, sees this as, treason against him because, and she, I said Anne Boleyn. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but Anne Boleyn was innocent of anything they said she did, and they chopped her head off. I mean, that was all that Henry was done with her. With Catherine Howard, she probably did it. I mean, she probably did have the affair, or affairs, depending on how you look at it. And so, I mean, as far as what she was charged with, which she shouldn't have been charged with anything, right? Because she's just a young girl having fun, living her best life, right? And she ends up, losing her head at the Tower as well, which is a sad, sad ending for her, Catherine Howard. It's of all the wives, she's the one I feel the worst for. I mean, besides Anne of Cleves. I mean, I thought she got a raw deal, at least by what Henry said about her. But Catherine Howard she's just a kid, a young kid, and doing, having fun, and then that's anyway. It's a sad story, but they say her ghost is still kicking around Hampton Court, which I think is a fascinating story. So anyway, so then you have, Henry is, he's went through 5 wives. So, what now? And he finds another one. And he just so happens to find a genius of a woman, right? Catherine Parr. Catherine Parr is an author. She's like a religious philosopher almost, right? And she is pretty accomplished. And actually, I will say this: Catherine Parr teaches Elizabeth and Mary both what it meant, how to be a queen, right? How to be a strong woman in the Tudor era, which is, there are with the Tudors, it's you have to be smart about it. If you're a woman during this time, you have to be actually smart about it. And Catherine Parr is genius. I mean, she takes control, but also will let the men believe that they're, stronger or whatever. Elizabeth does this too. I mean, she's brilliant doing this. Elizabeth the First. I mean, she's she does it amazingly. She will do it. She will, take control, but also say, "Well, I'm just a woman," and sort of make the men feel better that they're inferior to her. It's great. She's she's wonderful. Anyway, but Catherine Parr is able to do this. She's able to actually show them, because Henry is off, one last fight. He goes again against France. He's trying to do one last time, one last thing. And while he's gone, Catherine is in charge, and she takes charge. She doesn't put up with, she doesn't tolerate fools, I'll tell you. And Elizabeth and Mary both are able to see this, especially Elizabeth, because Elizabeth has a very close relationship with Catherine Parr. So much so that after Henry's death, she actually lives with Catherine Parr, and they have a very good relationship, until there's a guy named Thomas Seymour. And that is, Catherine Parr's like husband at this time after Henry. Allegedly, she had she loved him even before she married Henry, but she marries him later, and he had eyes for Elizabeth. Elizabeth was like 14. He had eyes for her. There's different stories about whether or not there was actually any like contact between the two. Uh, he would go into Elizabeth's bedroom when she was like 14, and he would get into her bed and do all this stuff. I mean, Seymour was kind of a, anyway, messed up kind of cat, as far as that goes. But Catherine Parr finds out about this, and instead of like getting after Thomas Seymour, which she should, she actually kicks Elizabeth out of the house. So, that's a sad ending to, she probably, of all the people that Elizabeth came across during this time frame, Catherine Parr was one of the more influential. So it's unfortunate that it ended that way because of some stupid dude, So, but Catherine Parr was the last of Henry VIII's wives. She ended up burying him, right? And Henry is not even buried in Westminster. He's buried elsewhere. And actually, as they buried him, we won't get into that. It's kind of gross. His body actually. So so there you have. There's 6 wives of Henry VIII, right? There they are, all of them. So the question was, when I started this thing, and this is just a brief overview of this. I mean, there's so many different little side stories you can get into about this entire journey that it's pretty cool. But the answer to the question of which one of King Henry VIII's wives are buried in Westminster Abbey, dun dun dun, Anne of Cleves. Anne of Cleves is buried in Westminster Abbey. She's the only one of King Henry VIII's wives that are buried in Westminster. And I think it is just it's justice for Anne. It's her revenge, really, because Anne of Cleves has caught all kind of nonsense over the years. I mean, Henry said she smelled bad. I like her not. Didn't like the way she looked. All these things that he said about her over the years, and people have sort of dug into that and talked about, well, why did she smell bad and all this stuff. I mean, it's just really messed up. And bottom line here is more of this was on Henry, I think, than Anne. But Anne of Cleves, well respected, buried in Westminster Abbey. She is the one wife of Henry VIII that is buried there. So that's the answer to the question. That's a brief overview of King Henry VIII's 6 wives. Each one of them had just really great qualities. And when you think about, each one and the differences when you're going through it, because it's great. It's a great story. The Tudors were fascinating bunch. There's really no doubt about that. It's pretty interesting stuff. But there you have it. Anne of Cleves, buried in Westminster Abbey. She is the one. And that is the answer to the question that I asked. I hope that some of this was interesting to you. And I look forward to more discussions on the Tudors in upcoming episodes of this podcast. So look forward to that. Anyway, have a fantastic day.